I'm not out of date, am I? I've been picking flowers for a woman, a sign of appreciation.
No, not at all, except those are poisonous.
I think adult love stories are rare today. I don't know why that is, but that was in large part the appeal of this story. Something that took place between two people who had already had a lot of life experience.
It was about their dreams, and about those dreams maybe not really meshing.
Clint is a master at creating this old-style film. When he shot Bridges, he knew he wanted to have that texture of the old romantic, because, listen, there were so many of them in the 40s, and techniques and things have changed, but chemistry of two actors on screen is always there.
Always this hot around here?
Oh, yes, this time of year, yeah.
It was just a romantic story. It could happen to anybody. All of a sudden, they've gone past where they should have gone with this whole relationship.
When we bought this book, there were very few people who knew anything about it. Then it's one of those books that became a phenomenon once it was published.
I didn't quite understand why it was as popular as it was, but I was also very early in my career at the time, so I didn't get that being offered a worldwide bestseller was an opportunity you just say yes to.
I think anytime you're adapting any book, it's tricky because you can never just translate the entire book to the screen, and what you're trying to do is really preserve the impact of the book on people.
The female friends of mine that were under 30 hated the book because they said, why doesn't she go off with him? And that I thought was kind of interesting because they were a generation that was raised on you can have it all. And they didn't understand that a woman in 1965 living on a farm in Iowa, that concept didn't exist. You sacrifice, you don't have it all.
Feature dinner!
Lily Zanuck called me up and said, have you ever read The Bridges of Madison County? I said, no, I haven't. She says, well, you're in it. And I said, oh, really? Maybe I better give it a look.
And then an interesting thing happened. They looked for a director.
We started off with another director, and everybody thought that he'd be really good for it, and he might have been, except that he went off with a different writer and kind of took the story in a different direction. We all got together, Steven Spielberg and Kathleen Kennedy and myself, and Steven felt, and so did I, that Richard LeGravionier's script was more true to at least the intent and the feeling of the book. And then the director said, well, I don't want to do that script. So Terry Semel called me up and said, would you do it? And I said, well, I hadn't thought of it that way.
I think increasingly, as Clint always does, he gets very involved in anything that he's doing, whether he's an actor or a director or writing the score or any number of things that he gets involved with. And he just increasingly had the vision for the movie.
I called the studio and said, yeah, I'll do it. I said, I'm off and running.
Where are we headed?
Out.
I like the storyline. The dilemmas in the picture weren't based upon somebody having some incurable this or that. It was just a set of circumstances, two outsider kind of people getting together in the center of America, in sort of a typical mid-America town like Winterset.
In the first act of the script, I had added a lot of original work that wasn't in the book. I had her have fantasies. I was creating this sort of inner life of a woman who was frustrated on a farm. And Clint, to his credit, said, when you're dealing with a book this popular, that's somewhat iconic to a culture, you can't stray too far from it, because then you alienate the people who do like the book in an effort to please the people who don't like the book. So we got rid of all that stuff. I wanted to find a tone that would work, and I sat down and I watched Brief Encounter, and I thought, this is the same delicate romance that this has to be, where it's through conversation and looks and familiarity and the simple details that two people fall in love.
Yeah, I know Bobby.
No.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
We always talked about Clint as being sort of the prototype for this story. I mean, if you're going to have somebody, you know, arrive in your life in the middle of nowhere, why not have it be Clint Eastwood?
I can tell you that Clint's performance is based on one thing, and a lot of people don't know this. That's who Clint Eastwood really is, that character.
You can kind of get lost when you're on the road a lot.
So what happened?
I never got lost. I was more at home everywhere than just in one place. He was riding in a pickup truck with a case of beer in the back or something. That sounded like something I would have done in my early life. In fact, I used to do that. I used to go out and scout locations in a pickup truck by myself. So I was used to doing that. I never met any Italian housewives that, or anything like that.
Before the Clint meeting, I had heard little ideas of other actresses that were younger, and I remember saying to them, you're gonna alienate every woman who read this book, because if she's in her 30s, that's not the same point as a woman who's in her 40s who has been married for over 20 years. It's a completely different character.
I read not the whole book, to be fair, but I didn't think that it would be something that I would be interested in. And then my friend Carrie Fisher gave Clint Eastwood my home phone number. And he made me an offer I couldn't refuse.
It's very hard to object to her. She's an extremely good actress and very versatile and the perfect time in life, perfect age and everything for it.
I think Clint at the time was 65, and I was soon to be 45, and I was playing a 45-year-old woman, but the studio felt I was too old to play this character. And so Clint made a, I gather, case for me, which I was glad about. And I would certainly have made a case for him. I didn't know anything about Iowa. I just cared that it was America. And I really understood who she was. It was a war bride in my neighborhood in New Jersey who lived up the street from us. And her name was Nucci, and her husband was a tall, blonde GI who came home and brought this exotic creature, and she would say, "Chrissy, take out the garbage." And I just was in love with her. I loved the way she talked and moved and spoke, and so I basically copied her.
In the first half, she managed to portray the balance of both being settled into a life and her dissatisfaction and yearning for something else. And then in the second half, she managed this incredible balance of the attraction and the yearning for him and the conflict that that created.
Can't sleep without you next to me anymore.
It's only 4 days, huh? Her characterization tells you why she's never gonna leave. She was rooted and foursquare. I worked hard on imagining a physicality for her, and there, you know, this is part of an actor's fun, is making sort of a full-bodied transformation. There's a sensuality about her, but it's protected.
See, we had a little eyeshadow and little lip gloss on her little lips, and they were just so nice, and we still write. We just kind of jumped right into the picture. We didn't, nobody we didn't sit and intellectualize on it. In fact, we were doing it somewhat in continuity. So instead of doing the last scene first, as sometimes happens in movies, we're doing it in continuity. So I wanted whatever awkwardness or clumsiness might have been in that first meeting, I wanted that on the screen. So I just didn't spend much time conversing with her at all until we got into it and we just started shooting.
And we obviously came from very different genres in film. So there's that attraction of opposites. That helps the magic potion.
I think the film was so successful because of the chemistry between Meryl and Clint. On camera, there was just this, wow. I mean, you could feel this, two strangers coming together for that moment.
I know that Clint wanted to develop a personal sort of friend, and he knew that if they cared for one another on a personal basis, that would come out on film. So both of them made efforts to be very friendly on the set, and it was fun to watch.
It was instant. Clint and Meryl were what you always look for in a romance. They had that chemistry on film. You just instantly believed that these two people were deeply in love with one another.
You feel the anticipation, and it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter, and it's crescendoing to that point, and you could just feel that movie just moving that way.
It was a great experience. All the actors are all terrific.
Clint does a great job of finding actors that are not well known, but usually right on the mark for their character performance.
It was my decision right from the beginning that I, as Richard, would love Meryl as Francesca, and that was all I could do.
What's wrong, Daddy?
If you made him a villain, then everybody would go, hey, naturally. Then it becomes everybody's rooting for the two to get to, but they're getting together for other reasons, for a great love. And the guy is a good man, and she was just a lonely person.
My character felt that there was something wrong, but he didn't know quite what it was. The thing about his kind of deathbed speech, you know, where he says, I know you've had your dreams, Franny, and I'm sorry I couldn't give them to you.
I love you so very much.
It was an easy film to shoot. We shot it in a month, the part with Meryl and myself. And then we went to the present day and shot the sister-brother, which is a whole other movie, so that took another couple of weeks.
One of the things that appealed to me about playing Michael was that he came from Iowa. I'm from Ohio originally. And even though Michael looked like a country boy, he was Italian. So he had this deep furnace of feelings, and you see a lot of that in the movie.
We're not cremating her and throwing her ashes off of some bridge where we can't even go visit her because she's gonna be blown all over the place like an ashtray.
We drive onto the set and we're late and we're nervous, and it's a big old house out in the country, beautiful, and all of a sudden this woman comes running across the yard, and I look and then I look again. I'm like, I say to Phyllis, I'm like, oh my God, that's Meryl Streep. And then she's yelling, stop that van, I want to meet my daughter. And I was like, oh my God. So she flings the door open, and I mean, there she is. And she grabbed my hand and pulled me out of the van and hugged me. And a lot of how this part came together for me had to do with that few minutes with Meryl Streep. I mean, I can't tell you how much she gave me in looking and touching me and being with me in a way that a mother would, and then to have her, you know, sort of ripped away, and then that's it.
After we said goodbye, she was gone. And it was almost as if Francesca were gone and a mother had died. And so that there was a feeling on the set, and that created the right atmosphere for the first couple of scenes that we shot. And it was the beginning of knowing that we were a part of something special.
What brings realism to films is that you really go to those areas like that and really capture what's there. You go back to mid-America, and a lot of those towns are just the way they were 50 years ago, and it becomes a character of the film.
I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go back to Winterset. I'm gonna look at the bridges, because they were talking about building bridges down there, augmenting it with other bridges. I said, well, wait a second, aren't the bridges there? What's the matter with the ones that are there? Well, you need to take out the sides so you can see this. I'm saying, let me just go down there. So I went down and looked at all the bridges, and then I went and asked the Historical Society if I could take off a few of the boards, and we'd put them back, and that we would also help with restoration of the bridges as we went, and they bought into that. And so we saved ourselves a few $100,000 there and went ahead with it.
Any place that has a selection of covered bridges, everybody in the community feels a real closeness, and it's a kind of romantic lifestyle to be by those covered bridges.
What we were looking for was everyone's quintessential concept of what an Iowa farmhouse would be like. And we were feeling anxious because time was running short, so we decided we'd rent a helicopter. And on the way back, I looked down and I saw the farm we ended up at. And there was just something immediately about it that spoke to me.
It had been abandoned for, I think they said 20 years, and occupied by raccoons and a lot of wild animals.
There were cows, you know, eating in the front yard. The bats were dropping their guano all over. The side porch was gone. The chimneys were gone. The staircase was missing. I mean, it was a wreck. Clint arrived as it was, you know, mostly done. And they trooped into the front door, and Clint looked around and he said, "Oh, this is quaint." I went, "Quaint? Oh, it's not good." And then he walked in to the kitchen and he looked around and he walked toward me, and I was backing up because I hardly knew the man, and back up some more until I'm finally cornered. He gives me a very sweet kiss and says, "Well, I hope that the level of acting can be up to the level of the set." And I went, "What?"
I think it's a beautiful film. Jack Green did such a fabulous job of photography. I mean, that guy, he's got an eye.
Fall gives you leaf color, something that enhances storytelling just by virtue of the surroundings. And especially in West Des Moines where we photographed, the color was just outstanding. And you get the late, low sun. Even in midday, the sun is coming down out of the middle of the sky so that you don't get top shadows. You get nice sort of angular sunlight. It's a great time of the year to shoot.
I didn't want it done with long lenses and gauziness and trying to make it romantic. In this look, I wanted it to be realistic feeling and not where people are distracted. There was none of that stuff.
Clint has, for years, kept his crew together. It's a familiarity. It's also he knows what to expect. I mean, you can't smoke this guy. I mean, he knows exactly what everybody's doing. And if you go on his set, it is the most calm, relaxed set.
Run an umbrella out here as quickly as possible to keep him from getting wet.
Everybody, I mean, Tim Robbins and all those guys were in Misty River came back and said, "Wow, when I direct again, I'm changing my set like this."
First day I arrived on the set, I remember getting there late in the morning. I had flown in, and I literally couldn't find exactly where they were shooting in the house because it was so quiet. You had no sense of where anybody was.
If I have any virtues at all, it's that I'm decisive. Now, whether I'm decisive at the right times or not remains to be seen.
It's a pleasure to sense that someone is making a decision rationally and calmly and not agonizing over it. Because agony on a film set is something that is very catchy and not necessarily a good thing to catch.
Mark?
Clint is the only director I've ever worked with. When you get called to the set, everyone is ready to work and there's absolute silence. And it's all about you working. And the first thing he says to you is, "So what do you think about this scene?" And so you feel completely at ease, and that's how he gets one or two takes.
Let's just fire one off to see where we are.
Clint shot it like a foreign film almost. He wasn't afraid of the silences. He wasn't afraid of letting the camera just sit and let the performances take over. It was almost like a French film to me.
My experience of Clint as a director, the thing I remember most is sitting in our chairs in between takes, and he's like so calm, you know, and laid back, and he whistles these jazz tunes all the time.
Clint doesn't say action or cut. He says, "Okay, let's start," or "Let's begin. When you're ready." He'll say something that lets an actor know that it's time to start, but he finds that it interrupts a thought pattern to hear somebody come up and say, "And action."
It's my experience that the really great directors don't let you feel when they're directing you or how, or you don't really know. At the end of the shoot, you think, boy, I got to do whatever I wanted on that. And you don't realize that you were subtly manipulated to do the things, I guess, that he wanted in this part. But I felt completely free.
Clint prefers that you bring it with you when you come, and he trusts that that'll happen. Once he hires you, he believes in you.
I remember after the first take, and we printed the rehearsal and moved to the close-up, and Meryl sort of looked like confused, and she said to the group of us, is this how it always is? and we all said, yeah, this is how it always is. This is, might want to get used to it because we very seldom have multiple takes, and unless you say you want another one, probably not going to have another one. After about 3 days, she said, I love this way of shooting. This is so much fun. I don't have to work up to anything. I can start at the top. I can start right at the highest note.
So when we would be rehearsing, they would be moving the lights and fixing the lights, because often he'd say, well, that felt pretty good. Let's just move on, you know. But he had a date on the golf course about 4 p.m. and he made it out there many, many days.
Well, I wouldn't want to take you away from what you're doing.
No, I was just going to have some iced tea and then split the atom, but that can wait.
I was on the phone with Clint at the end of the day talking about what he had shot. We got done with the conversation and he said, I think I'm going to wrap. And I said, oh, great. And I'm thinking it's 5 o'clock, so he's wrapping a little early that day. And he said, no, actually, I think I'm finished. I think I'm done. I said, what do you mean you think you're done? He said, I don't think there's really anything more I need to shoot. I said, you mean done with the movie? We were 36 days into shooting, and he finished. So I raced back so that I could be part of at least, you know, the wrap party.
I think it was Henry Bumstead who famously said, Clint takes the BS out of filmmaking.
Joel has been editing for me for so long, we kind of know right away. He understands right away where we're going with it.
The editing style of that film is different than probably any film we've ever done. We really allowed the sequences not to be cutty.
Dinner will be ready in half an hour.
As Clint says, if two actors are working, if they're interesting enough and their performances are there, the people are drawn into it and to watch. And he wanted that film to have this total breadth of wideness, spaciousness. We were very loose in our editing, very wide. We knew we were going to get this love scene later on in the film. Until that point, we wanted to crescendo there. And so to do that, you stay wide. As the relationship started to build, and that dance, you could just feel the romance coming together.
'Cause I can see how fair you are.
The music really thrilled me because he had played, he was always at the little piano that was in the house, at this house where we were shooting. He was always there kind of noodling around. And he was playing this theme early on.
I used kind of outsider music because I figured the two people were both outsiders. So I took people that were outsiders themselves as artists. People like Irene Krall, who was a very underrated singer, and Johnny Hartman, who I had seen years ago with the Dizzy Gillespie Orchestra. So I'd play those songs and let the visual kind of go by itself. Didn't have to explain much.
And my heart will be in it for.
I went out with Clint at least one night that I can remember where we went to a local jazz club, several of us, and there he discovered a guy playing trumpet who ended up in the film. In fact, his own son, Kyle, played the bass, stand-up bass, in the little jazz club that they went to.
The argument in the kitchen helped a great deal because it would be difficult for her to have all these feelings and then have him just go off and understand that he must and she must stay without some kind of turmoil.
The fight scene in the kitchen was the moment where the limitations of this dream present themselves to Francesca. It's the morning after. It's when you realize it's over. It's a great scene, and it's The one where, as an actor, Clint wasn't afraid to go all the way with the emotional commitment that he needed.
I don't want to need you.
What?
Because I can't have you.
And then I was so amazed because after I saw the film cut together, he took out sort of the more shaken parts of his performance, which, you know, in the envelope, please, it's like he would have. Every actor kills for this scene, and he kind of pulled back on it. And I was surprised. But I think he has a real good idea of how much is needed to tell the story on his face and how far he wants to push it. It was a very elegant sense of restraint in the editing.
There's a scene where Clint is standing in the rain looking at her, and he is just letting himself look all his years in that rain, loving her and vulnerable, and I think that's one of the bravest things he's done in a career of amazingly brave work.
It's so amazing that also directing that scene, that he was able to reveal himself, you know, so honestly.
One of the things I'm most proud of is the moment when her hand goes to the handle of the door, wanting the audience to think that we were going to change it, and then giving them exactly what they wanted.
They really wanted to screw with people's minds.
It was just a wonderful red herring. Some audiences will be going, yes, get out. And others will be saying, no, stay. But then it leads us into the emotional tragedy of the film.
It's so interesting about film because you have this script and you read the script is so, this one especially is fairly densely written. People are just talking to each other. But then in the end, the thing people most remember is a visual thing. It's that hand on the handle and him in the rain and her looking out and the traffic lights and the missed opportunity. And I think it has to do with the fact that people don't like to be told what to feel in a movie. They like to have it ambush them and feel it and have it and tell the story themselves. They can only do that when there's no talking. And so they have to scream at the screen, "Open the door!" You know?
I think people like a romantic story. I think at least they did at that time, and I hope they would now. I think that was the success of the book, and I think there's no reason that it shouldn't be the same for a film.
Clint really had a vision for that film that came across on the screen in a classic that hopefully will be shown to students down the road. You know, this is how you do this type of a film.
The audience actually grew. So it showed that there were people out there that were looking for movies like this, and it was enormously successful.
There's nothing in that movie that doesn't happen today and didn't happen 150, 300 years ago, or won't happen in 150 or 300 years from now, because it is a timeless story about a human heart.
That's what I go to the movies for, to feel like other people feel, to know what they know, to live in rural Iowa and see an old truck come down the driveway and think, who's this? You know, fun.